Good day, everyone. I am Dave A. Ohario, a BS Criminology second year student of NARSO. So today, I'm gonna discuss about Institutional Correction Module 1. Institution, a society or organization founded for a religious, educational, social, or similar purposes. So institution is, as we can see in the society, it is where we can see our traditions, beliefs, and religious aspects in the community. Correction, a branch of the criminal justice system concerned with the custody, supervision, and rehabilitation of criminal offenders. So correction, it is where we can find our offenders to be reformed. Lesson 1. Global view on prison administration. Prison antiquity to modernity. The influence of the Roman Catholic Church. Pope John Paul, the pro-life Pope. Walnut Street Jail, King Henry VIII, King Edward VI, a jewel of King Henry VIII. Global view on prison administration. Global, relating to the world entirely or comprehensive. View, an opinion or way of thinking about something. So, what is global? It is global, as we can see. Global refers to whole world, and view is refers to what we can see or the opinion we think. Prison, a building in which people are legally held as a punishment for a crime they have committed or while waiting trial. So, prison like the prison cell in Manila City Jail, the New Bilibid prison, and the when in Muntinlupa. The four major purpose in prison. First, it is retribution, incapacitation, deterrence, and rehabilitation. That is the four purposes of prison. So first, retribution. It means punishment for crimes against society. So retribution, it is where criminal offenders are punished of the crime they do. The next, incapacitation. It refers to the act of making an individual incapable of committing a crime, historically by execution or banishment. It is where a life sentence or a death sentence. So that was incapacitation. Deterrence, the crime prevention effects of the threat of punishment, is a theory of choice in which individuals balance the benefits and cost of crime. Deterrence is the way of crime prevention, like to avoid the crime, to avoid a certain crime. So that is deterrence. Next is rehabilitation, the action of restoring someone to health or normal life through training and therapy after imprisonment, addiction, or illnesses. So that is where correction does. It is rehabilitation to cure or undergo some therapy of the person committed in crime. So next is prison administration. It involves enforcement of rules and regulation in the management of prison system and also involves security and discipline. So that was prison administration. It implies rules and regulation to follow. Next, Philippines. In 2018, sixth highest prison population out of 21 Asian countries. As of 2019, out of 108.31 million people, of 215,000 of those people were incarcerated. There are 933 prisons running. So in the Philippines, there are 933 prisons that currently running in the Philippines. And in 2019, 108.31 million people, and the 215,000 of those are the people incarcerated. So what is incarcerated? Incarcerated is to put in a prison or jail. So that is like a prisoner or a person deprived of liberty. So incarceration system is authorized to confine persons convicted of crimes. This confinement, whether before or after a criminal conviction, is called incarceration. So that was incarceration system. Next is 5 facts about the Philippines incarceration system. The first, is severe overcrowding. Second, pre-trial detainees. Third, high death tolls. Fourth, vigilant justice. Fifth, corruption. So first is severe overcrowding is a social phenomenon occurring when the demand for space exceeds the capacity. So like in overcrowding is when many people gathered in one place. So that's severe overcrowding. Severe overcrowding. Manila City Jail, instead of 170 inmates, 500 people are there. Quezon City Jail, 130 inmates instead of 30 people. So it is called overcrowding because instead of 170 inmates, there are 500. Then instead of 30, there are 130. So it's overcrowding. Next, pre-trial detainees. 25.1% of incarcerations are pre-trial. In 2018, 141,422 of 188,278 prisoners were pre-trial detainees. So out of 188,278, 141,422 were at pre-trial detainees. So pre-trial. Death toll, a term used to refer any person captured or otherwise detained by an armed force. So that was death toll. To be detained by armed forces. High death tolls. About 5,200 inmates die annually at the New Bilibid prison in BPO because of overcrowding. So it is one problem of the NBPO because of many of overcrowding. Many of the inmates died. Dirty living conditions and violence. Also, violence in NBPO are very nasty because there is killing inside jail. Lacks of nutritional food and basic healthcare. And lacks of nutritional food. No, not enough. They have not enough ration of foods. Vigilante, a member of a self-appointed group of citizens who undertake law enforcement in their community without legal authority, typically because the legal agencies are thought to be inadequate. So vigilant are people who hunt down criminals. So that they are called vigilants. Vigilant justice. Jobless citizens were recruited to kill anyone suspected of dealing, buying, or using drugs. Philippines police force and unidentified gunmen have killed 7,000. So, as I said earlier, vigilante are a persons who kill criminals and they are unknown. Next, corruption, dishonesty or fraudulent conduct by those in power, typically involving bribery. So corruption, it is very common in our country, Philippines. There's many corrupt officials in the government. Corruption. In August 2018, a former mayor may have been released for good behavior. September 2018, a woman was told her husband's sentence would be shortened if she paid 50,000 pesos. Senators stated that inmates could live like kings for a fee. So it is that examples are corruption because they got fees to live like kings instead of good and honest behavior. Petty corruption is the lowest form of corruption, typically involving low-level public servants or managers who abuse the limited authority of their positions for personal gain. So petty corruption is like in the public servants, like in our community, that they use their positions for personal gain and abuse the small ones. Grand corruption involves major political or executive actors whose illegal activities subvert the legal, political, and economic aims of entire countries or corporations. Incidents of grand corruption captures international headlines, but they are less common than acts of petty corruption which take place on a regular basis. So grand corruption, as what in the word says, grand, so it is international corruptions like big political persons, and many others. Systemic corruption, also called endemic corruption, occurs when a public or private organization establishments rules or norms of governance that permit or encourage corruption. So it is systemic corruption, then they encourage people to join it. Prison antiquity to modernity. Antiquity, the ancient past, especially the period before the Middle Ages. So that was antiquity. Antique, as in the word antique, it is from ancient times. Modern is the modern era of humanity to the degree that such a rapidly evolving notion can be categorized. So it is from the word modern, it is now. History of prison. Major ancient civilization used concept of prisons as a mean to detain and remove personal freedoms of incarcerated people. So in the major ancient civilization, prisons are used to detain persons who does crime and for the incarcerated people. Prisons were often used as a temporary stopgap before sentencing to death or life of slavery. So it is where the primary stopgap when sentencing a prisoner for whether for a death sentence or slavery. Prisons were often used for holding political prisoners, enemies of the state, and prisoners of the war. So when war started, when many people was there, they hold them in the prison cells. Mesopotamia and Egypt, prisons were almost stationed in the underground dungeons where guilty or suspected criminals. Greece, primary source of their detention were not dungeons, high walls, or bars, but simple wooden blocks that were attached to their feet. So in Greece, the primary source of their detention is not like in ours that have tall bars, high walls, but instead they uses wooden blocks that are attached in the feet of the prisoner. Ancient Roman Empire. Prisoners themselves were held either in simple cells or chained to the walls for life or for time. So, ancient Roman Empire, the prisoners are held in the simple cell and were chained. Not unlike in our country, they are not chained but and free to gather around. Prisoners that were not sentenced to death were sold as slaves or used by the Roman government as workforce. So, prisoners who are not sentenced by death, they used to be a slave in or to be a workforce in the Roman government. Gladiators, one of the famous uses for the slaves in Roman Empire. Colosseum Arena in Rome, the famous gladiator battleground, had a slave army of 224 slaves that worked daily as a power source. So, the prisoners who was not included in the death sentence, they became a slave army in the Roman Empire. European prisons. In 1166, Henry II commissioned the construction of first prison together with the first draft of English legal system that used concept of jury. So it began in Europe, it began in 1166. The age of modern prisons. Prisoners started receiving more care. 20th century, large amount of war prison camps and concentration camps. World War II, political opponents, Jews, Egyptians, criminals, and others. So it is the age of modern prisons. So as of today. In 1215, King John signed Magna Carta which stated that no man could be imprisoned without trial. In addition, one of the most historic prison legislation was introduced. So in 1215, King James had signed the Magna Carta which stated that man could not be imprisoned without trial. So that's it is where become. The rise of the industry. Between 16th and 18th century, English prisons became overcrowded. New penal measures started being implemented. France continued their practice of penal colonies until the middle of 20th century. Russia, used remote penal colonies in the frozen northeast Siberia. Modern prisons. Prisoners started receiving more care. Concept of rehabilitation was introduced, and governments around the world started reconsidering their views on solitary confinement. So it is where the prisoners are treated well and they got some therapy to be ready to be reformed. So it is where the modern prisons come. World War II, Nazi government formed over 300 detention centers in which political opponents, Jews, gypsies, criminals, and others were detained without judicial process. So in the World War II, there are 300 detention cells to be used for Jews, gypsies, and criminals. Probation service. It was introduced in 1991. Prisons became widespread across the entire United States, with over 40 of them being active in the year 2005. Inmates in those prisons held in the 23-hour-long periods of cell isolation. So, the probation of service in cell are introduced in 1991. Different types of prisons, antiquity times. So it is the, as you can see, it is the different types of prison in antique times. Different types of prisons, modern times. It is where our prison cells are today. The prison cells today. The influence of the Roman Catholic Church, Pope John Paul, the pro-life Pope. Influence, the capacity to have an effect on the character development or behavior of someone or something or the effect itself. So influence, it is where you can influence and encourage persons. So that was influence. Roman Catholic are larger group and they do believe in papal authority. They are the followers of Saint Peter, who is believed to be one of the 12 apostles of Jesus. So Roman Catholic, as we are today, it is a religious group and a religion. Church, the capacity to have an effect on the character development or behavior of someone or something or the effect itself. So church. Pro-life. It means that supporting the right to the life of the unborn, against abortion experiments on embryos, etc. Opposing the legal right to obtain an abortion. It is pro-life. It means they are not supporting abortion. So it is where Catholic religions. Pope John Paul II. Pope John Paul. He was made a cardinal by Pope Paul VI in 1967, and in 1978 became the first non-Italian pope in more than 400 years. Early life. After World War II ended, he finished his religious studies at a Krakow seminary and was ordained in 1946. Rise within the church. He returned to his native Poland in 1948 and served in several parishes in and around Krakow. Well regarded for his contribution to the church, John Paul was made a cardinal in 1967 by Pope Paul VI. Becoming Pope. As the leader of the Catholic Church, he traveled the world visiting more than 100 countries to spread his message of faith and peace. So it is like in the Bible, they traveled and preaches the word of God. John Paul uses his influence to bring about political change and is credited with the fall of communism in his native Poland. John Paul will also be remembered for greatly improving relations between Catholic and Jews. So Pope John Paul II used his influence to bring about political change and prevent and destroy communism in Poland. Jews or Jewish people are an ethno-religious group and nation originating from the Israelites and Hebrew of historical Israel and Judah. Religion's value in prison. About its contribution to the individual, focus is to perceive role of religion. Focus on the immediate value that religions have for inmates. So, what is the importance of and value of religion in prisons? It is used to make the inmates to come back to God again and not and to do not commit another crimes again. Influence and practice of religion. The Bible stories beginning in the days of Constantine, 15th century, releasing prisoners during Easter time, pardon or reduce sentence for offenders. They reduces the life sentence of a prisoner because of religion practices. Imprisonment under church. Medieval times Roman Catholic Church developed penal techniques. Protestants of Amsterdam built a house of correction. Sisters of the Good Shepherd built correctional facilities for women. It is where a church imprisonment system. Pope Clement built the famous Michael prison. It is the Michael prison. Vatican prison, a model prison designed for Europe and American. So it is Vatican. Walnut Street Jail. So what is Walnut Street Jail? Walnut Street has been characterized as the city's premier shopping district. It is where you can shop any items. Originally built as a conventional jail just before the American Revolution, it was expanded in 1790 and hailed as a model of enlightened thinking about animals. So it was also a jail. Walnut Street Jail. So as you can see, it is the Walnut Street Jail. Jail means a confinement facility of a federal, state, or local law enforcement agencies whose primary use is to hold person pending adjudication of criminal charges. So what is jail? It is where you put the persons deprived of liberty and the persons who commits crime with further trials. 18th century, fellow prisoners became the accepted correctional practice. West Jersey and Pennsylvania Quakers were primarily responsible for many of the prison reforms. King Henry VIII. King Henry VIII was born at Greenwich on 28 June 1491, the second son of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. He is a powerful man and charismatic figure, perhaps best known for his tumultuous love life and establishment of the Church of England. He is also credited with establishing the Royal Navy, encouraging shipbuilding, and the creation of anchorages and dockyards. So, King Henry is a powerful man and a very good leader in their era. So, King Henry the Seventh have 6 wives. So, it is first is Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, Jane Seymour, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr. Catherine of Aragon, 1485 to 1536, demoted for bearing no son. Catherine remained at Henry's side for 23 years and is even thought to be the only woman the king ever truly loved. Catherine died at Kimballton Castle as a princess, not a queen, on January 7, 1536, because he is not unable to give birth. Anne Boleyn, the union that sparked Reformation, beheaded. Henry and Anne wed in January of 1533 and Anne gave birth to their first child, Elizabeth, in September the same year. Desperate to end the relationship, Henry accused her of adultery and treason and had the marriage annulled. On May 19, 1536, Anne was beheaded for the alleged crimes. So Anne was the second wife of King Henry. Third, Jane Seymour, 1508-1537, died after giving birth to male heir. Jane had served as a lady-in-waiting to both Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn. Days after Anne's execution, Henry married his third wife, Jane Seymour. On October 12, 1537, Jane gave birth to Edward VI and died from complication of the birth several weeks later. Anne of Cleves, 1515, strategic 6-month marriage. Henry requested to the woman's portrait and found Anne to be more flattering of the two. When Anne arrived in England on January 1, 1540, Henry was shocked that she looked nothing like the painting. So, King Henry met Anne when he saw the portrait, but unfortunately, he was shocked when Anne arrived. Catherine Howard, 1523-1542, treasured then executed. Said to be delighted with this rambunctious new bride, Henry showered Catherine with gifts and called her his rose without a thorn. Catherine was executed for adultery and treason at the Tower Green on February 13, 1542. Just like Anne, Catherine was executed because of alleged adultery and treason. Catherine Parr, 1512-1548, peacemaker who outlived Henry. Henry married his sixth wife Catherine Parr in July 1543. She managed to avoid the fate of her predecessors, bringing stability and peace to the court while serving as a kind and caring stepmother to Henry's children. But Catherine Parr also died after the death of King Henry. Of all Henry's wives, Borman says Catherine Parr had the most influence upon the widest variety of areas, including court culture, religion, the role of women, and the education of Henry's child. So Catherine was one of the most influential wives of King Henry. Events of criminal case: a Tudor murder till death do us part. King Edward VI, a jewel of King Henry VIII. King Edward VI. He was born on October 12, 1537. Henry's the eighth surviving and only legitimate son and the heir to the throne. He is one and only legitimate son of King Henry. Was King of England and Ireland for 28 January 1547 until his death in 1553. He was crowned on February 20, 1547 at the age of 9. Edward was the son of Henry VIII and Jane Seymour and the first English monarch to be raised as a Protestant. So he was pronounced king at the age of 9, and he was the son of King Henry VIII. Due to his young age, the nation was governed by a regency led by Edward VI's uncle, the Duke of Somerset, until October 1549. He reigned for only 6 years until his death in July 1553, possibly from tuberculosis. He continued his father's work in the reformation of the church and the removal of Catholicism across Britain. So, that's all. Thank you.